Hello, I'm Krista Jimenez, the owner of Pura Vida Moms, and I'm here with Mary Grace Otis, the owner of the Global Mom Show. Hi, Mary Grace.
Hi, Krista. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you for being here. How's your day going?
Pretty good. Just getting back in the groove of school and everything like that. It's fun.
Yeah, us too.
Yeah.
And the full moon lately has been a little crazy with small kids.
We haven't noticed that, but that might explain a couple things too. So,
Maybe now you're noticing it.
yeah, really.
Well, I'm super excited to have you here. We're going to divide our episode up kind of into two parts because Mary Grace has a podcast, The Global Mom Show, and it's all about how to incorporate all different cultures, languages, ideas, ways of life into the way that we educate and interact with our children so that they have a larger global mindset. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and race and poverty in closing the achievement gap in schools, just for 5 minutes.
Right. And hopefully you're going to dissect my bilingual situation at home and come up with some plans for me as well.
Yes, and then second part, we will reveal Mary Grace's secret, which is that she and her husband are bilingual and they are not talking to their kids in their second language as much. So
and
we'll
we
talk a
speak
little
the
bit about
same
that.
language. We speak the same second language. I know, it's horrible. Okay.
It's crazy. No, it's not horrible. And we're gonna talk about that, which we talked a little bit last week with Adam Beck about that too. So, so Mary Grace, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Global Mom Show?
Okay.
And how it kind of was started and how it's going.
Yeah, well, I lived overseas for most of my 20s on and off in Germany and then in India, and I worked overseas and traveled a lot. My family have different backgrounds in social work, as missionaries, as teachers, and professors. I have family that lives in my parents lived in Albania for the last 10 years. My husband's family lived in Germany for 25 years or 20 years. So we just have a big kind of diverse background of where we've lived. And all those global ideas have been spinning around in my head. But for the last 9 years or so, I've been in the US and I've been basically child rearing. So I had 3 kids in 4.5 years. And the oldest one is now 6. And I've been thinking a lot about how to give this global identity and global awareness to my kids. And we live in a very rural community with very little diversity. And although we have great schools and great people, we don't have that opportunity for learning another language or for diverse interactions, even on the simplest of levels. I mean, finding different kinds of food at restaurants is even difficult. I mean, it's just we're just not around that, and there's not very many immigrants in our community, and so I just wanted to broaden my own children's horizons and really also give other people the tools to be able to do that as well. So on the Global Mom Show, I interview moms from around the world about how they are incorporating multicultural ideas into their own homes. So we've done books, we will plan on doing cooking, we're talking about travel. We've also talked with expats about their own experiences as TCKs, what it's like to be married to someone from a different culture. We've talked about teaching your kids a second language or not. We've talked about I'm trying to remember. We've talked with Homa Tavangar about what it means to be a global citizen and just having that global worldview. So I like to bring in moms from all different backgrounds and ask them what they're doing in their home and what can we learn from, because I mean, I'm not the most creative at finding all the crafts and getting all the multicultural things together and doing this big program for my kids. I really want it to be incorporated into our daily life, into our conversation. And it's really interesting that you're talking about race tonight and identity, because that's one of the things that my listeners have said they're interested in. Like, how do you talk to your kids about what it means to be multicultural? How do you talk to your kids about race and racism in the United States as well as colorism abroad? How do you talk to your kids about poverty? All of those kind of things. So in the next couple months, I'm going to be having some experts on to talk about how you talk to your kids about those things. So that's just an overview of what I'm doing, and it's really fun. I hope that you guys will join me and listen and join our community and get involved. So,
I love it. I love it. And I think it dovetails perfectly with Bilingual We, because we have a lot of parents who say, I want to raise my children bilingual, but I don't have the resources. Either I don't have bilingual school, I don't have the community, I can't speak in a second language all the time. And so a lot of people, Adam Beck last week said the only way to fail at raising bilingual kids is to not even try. And he's right, except for it can also be something where you try and then it's not sustainable and you don't have the right plan for your family. And so one thing that I always encourage parents to do is, at the very minimum, be exposing their kids from a very early age to all kinds of different languages and all kinds of different cultures, so that it's not one of those things where kids go to school and they have never seen anything outside of their own race or culture, whatever that may be. If their race is African American, or if their race is Caucasian, or all of those different things. This idea that kids need to know there's a larger world out there.
right.
And I love that you do that, and that you're really empowering moms, right? It's the Global Moms Show. So it's really more about educating moms. Well, it's really about just sharing stories, which is what I love.
The other thing that I believe is that if we're going to raise a generation of globally minded kids, then the moms also have to be globally minded. And we can't do that if we're just folding laundry all day, or going to work all day, or just focusing on what we're going to feed our kids. All of that is really important. But I mean, for me, I need to expand my mind. I mean, when I was in graduate school, I was having these kind of discussions about poverty and race and world cultures and cultural identity and capitalism versus socialism and all of these big ideas that are still affecting our political system and our lives, and fair trade and what should we be buying and human trafficking, all of those things. I don't get to talk about that anymore with most of my friends. When we have play dates, it's like, what kind of, snacks is your 2-year-old eating these days? And, how can you get them potty trained? And all of that is important too. But I wanted to provide a space where moms can get some of that interaction and some of that awareness besides just listening to NPR or watching the news. Because we also just need to have those conversations with women who are trying to figure out how to take those big ideas of the world and just incorporate them in small ways into their own life. So if there's a refugee crisis happening overseas, how do you talk about that with your 6-year-old? Do you? Should you? What should you say? How do you make those connections? And so that's really what I'm interested in, is like, moms also need a place where they can learn and stay connected. It's not just about what activity are you going to do with your kids to make them more multicultural. It's about expanding your own mind so that those interests overflow into your kids' lives.
I love it. I love it. Even just the fact that that you're having those conversations when your kids are around. Since I've started Pura Vida Moms, and Eliana will say, we have Bilingual We, it's Mondays, and just kind of this whole idea that when I'm now learning and doing something, Eliana, and not as much Annabelle, but Eliana, she's 3.5, she's starting to have that language around me empowering parents to be bilingual. She's hearing me say these things on the phone. She's hearing me talk about them with my husband, and it's bleeding over into what her reality is. Even though you're right, it's a small way. I haven't named it that way, but that's kind of what Bilingual We is for Heather and I. Is just, we're 2 bilingual moms who raising kids in our minority language, and it's really hard. And we didn't know where to go with that and what to do. So you create a community. And also because we have such an online world now, our kids are going to be interacting with, working with, having bosses that are from another country, that English may not be their first language. And the sooner that they can adapt and learn to really celebrate that and go with the flow on that is going to set them up for success, economic success in the future.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So the elephant in the room is the article.
Yeah.
Super, super heavy article this week from Heather. And Heather is so sorry she couldn't be here. She's stuck in a rainstorm driving from Wisconsin to Chicago. And she sent us this article from, I'm trying to remember I look at the author's name, by Pedro Noguera, who, this article is a little bit old, but it can be summarized by talking about what are some of the causes of the racial inequality in achievement in schools, and some ways that we can work on making them better. So, I don't know, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think, I mean, the beginning part that's a little bit disturbing is that it's presenting all this information about the fact that for so many years, people did think race was the determining factor in intelligence. So that it wasn't based on, availability of resources or teaching or anything else. It was simply the color of your skin. And then it just amazes me that that is even, you know, an issue. But it is, and some people still think that. And that's very unfortunate. So he kind of takes you through the history of race and the connection in schools and achievement and that sort of thing, and then ends up with the whole idea that a lot of other sources contribute to poor achievement by Blacks and Latinos and other races and poor whites. That a lot of it is based on poverty, is based on access to resources and access to good schools and access to, as you mentioned, early childhood education and healthcare, all of those things that happen from a very young age, awareness of books and words and those things. And if you enter into kindergarten without all of that, you're already starting behind. So he just kind of makes the point that to get to a place where the races are going to be achieving equally, then there has to be equality on other levels as well, which there is vast inequality in this country still. And it unfortunately a lot of times falls on a racial divide.
Yeah, racial. And then I always think about Jonathan Kozol's work in education of how, just exposing the inequality, the economic inequality of how money is distributed and allotted to public schools. So kind of perpetuating this racial inequality in that if you have lower property taxes, then your local school is going to have less money, and you're going to have, if you live in a poor area, there's less chance that the parents will be able to fundraise the extra money for all of these extra activities. And so that whole economic structure of education has been really perpetuating the achievement gap, in that even if you do come into school behind, if you're not in a good school or having a good teacher, there's a huge teacher shortage in Colorado right now, that vastly changes your ability to be successful academically, regardless of race or class, actually, by the time you've even gotten to kindergarten.
Right. There was a recent episode of This American Life. It was actually a double episode. It might have been even, 6 months or a year ago, but it's episode number 562, The Problem We All Live With. And it talks about racial inequality in schools, and it presents a lot of the research and a lot of the history of the desegregation program. And I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, where there was a desegregation program. I lived in the suburbs, and they brought in busloads of people that chose to come to the suburbs to go to school. And so some of our friends and people that were at our school were African American. And for those people that graduated from that, they had wonderful achievement and went on to do great things. And some people said, this is an amazing opportunity, but then they stopped the program. So then it goes through and it talks about Ferguson, which is in St. Louis City, and that their school was just failing and had no money, and that the people in that community who wanted to learn didn't have an option of anywhere else to go. So they decided they were going to bus those students out to another suburb. I think it was Francis Howell, which if you're from St. Louis, you'll know all these cities, but if not, it doesn't matter. But so they were going to do the desegregation again and bus these students to another school. And they chose a school that was because they thought less students would choose it then to come out. So it takes like 45 minutes or an hour to get there. And the whole thing is so interesting because you just hear in all the parents' voices, the white parents, the racial tension and fear of all these African American students being bused now into their high performing school. What's going to happen? Our school is going to go down. It's going to be violent. I mean, all these stereotypes are coming up. And yet you follow the story of this young woman who is living in Ferguson, and she's practically overjoyed and crying with the fact that she now gets to go to a good school. She's so happy, and she's just overjoyed because this was not even part of her opportunity at all. Anyway, I would just suggest listening to those 2 episodes because it's a really interesting picture about what race really does to people who want to learn, how not the fact that you are from a different race, but the fact that you are given different opportunities because of where you live. And a lot of times that is along racial lines. So,
right. And I think that, and I really want to find the study that's fairly new that talks about how race, when everyone is on an even playing field from kindergarten on, race does not make any difference on achievement. It's about
right.
access. There's a lot of talk in the education community now about grit, this idea of like working hard. If you have equal opportunity, then bringing in minority students to a high performing school doesn't lower the bar. It raises it for everyone. And so I really I'll try to find that article and add it to the show notes. In Denver, we're facing something really different where there is no neighborhood school anymore. Every single school is choice, which flips the coin a little bit because I live in what is considered a high poverty, high minority language area. So traditionally, this neighborhood has not had good schools, but there's been a lot of push to make the schools better. And actually, our neighborhood school is great, and I would love to send my daughter there, but there's no neighborhood schools anymore. It doesn't matter where you live. You have to just choice in. And so I don't know if my daughter will get to go to the school that is across the street or if I will have to drive her across town.
Right.
And so from a race and privilege point, I think it's a really great program. But from a logistical point as a mother, I would really love for my daughter to be able to go to the neighborhood school. So,
well, and wouldn't it be great if every neighborhood school were good?
Exactly. Right. That's the whole crux of the issue. Every school's good. So, so we've talked a little about race and poverty, but let's switch over to bilingualism a little bit here.
Okay.
Because Mary Grace and her husband are both bilingual. They speak excellent German, and they do not pass that on to their kids. So tell us a little bit about what bilingualism looks like in your house right now.
Okay, well, it doesn't look like a whole lot because while I would say that my husband and I are both fluent in German, we are way out of practice. So I haven't lived there since 2002, I think. So it's been quite a while. And my husband lived there. He grew up there until he was about 10 and lived in a totally German speaking community and just spoke English at his home. And then he studied abroad and lived over there. And we still have friends over there, and we can speak amongst ourselves. So we talk to each other when we have something that we don't want the kids to understand, or we talk to his parents in German sometimes. They lived over there for 20 years, so we speak German with them. And a lot of times it's interesting because we'll just throw in a German word here and there because it's easier. We both understand it. It seems more appropriate. The word fits the situation better than any English word we can come up with. Those kind of bilingual issues where you just think of things and you just say them in German. So, but a lot of times we'll start a conversation in German and finish it in English. Now, we did not specifically decide not to raise our children bilingual. We just haven't done anything about it yet. So I'm kind of the poster child for the mom or the mom and dad who maybe they learned a language really well in high school or in college and then studied abroad and then came back, and now they're raising their kids and they're out of touch with their language and there's no resources around and you're not really sure what to do. And I think for us, and I asked my husband this the other day, I'm like, why haven't we done anything with teaching our kids? Like, we both wanted to do this. Why haven't we done anything? And he's like, well, we just got so overwhelmed with parenting in general. I mean, we had 3 kids in 4 years, and it's it's a lot just to do that, just to keep everyone fed and diapered and sleeping and sane and pay the bills and go to work and all that stuff. And so I think what I realized is I waffled so much. Like, I was like, should I teach them German? Should I teach them Spanish? Because German doesn't have a lot of usage in America. Should I teach them Spanish? Well, I don't know Spanish. Well, their uncle speaks Spanish. Well, maybe we could get Spanish resources at home. Well, I don't have money for that. Well, I can't, there seem to be so many barriers. And what I've kind of come to the conclusion now is that it's not just going to happen. Like, we're going to have to decide we are going to make this happen. And I think with a lot of things, like even with the Global Mom Show, with having a global perspective in life, it doesn't have to be like incredibly hard and difficult, but you have to be intentional about it. So that's what I'm learning. And I think now that my oldest child is 6, I mean, if I know you have younger kids, but I feel like 5 and 6 is really a turning point for kids, as far as they're kids. They're not preschoolers, they're not toddlers, they're not infants, they're kids. They can understand, they can talk with you, you can have discussion, and now it's to the point where I really want to be able to share all these things with my son. And he's done. I mean, he doesn't need me to diaper him anymore. He doesn't need me to get him to sleep and all that. Well, sometimes he does, but so I feel like there's a little more space in my life for being able to do bilingualism, but now he's not that interested. So there's barriers to that. And I've started like, excuse me, speaking to my 1-year-old in German some, and trying to read some books and that sort of thing, but we just haven't gotten too far. So that's kind of the scenario here.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to say is that I thank you for sharing that experience with us. I get it. I think that for me, the need for my kids to be bilingual was so relevant because family relationships are so strong, and both of their grandparents and aunts and uncles are all monolingual in opposite languages. But there are days when it is so exhausting to speak only Spanish. And I've got 2 kids, like you said, feeding, diapering, nursing, sleeping, grocery shopping, not to mention trying to blog in there sometimes. And I've been failing miserably at that this last week, but it is hard. And so the fact that you didn't make that plan first and it kind of fell by the wayside, I think is really, really typical. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, life has to happen. But I love this idea that you're identifying that now you have the bandwidth to be able to say, no, this is something that I want to do and have space and the mental energy to do. So the first thing I want to say is, like, it's not too late. It is not. I think that when kids are like teenage years, it's hard at that point to introduce this new thing. But kindergarten, first grade, up through 6th grade, it's not too late. So I think what I would encourage you or empower you to do is to decide how you're going to introduce it and what's going to be the non-negotiable of that. So is it going to be German dinners? You're going to speak German at dinner, and you and your husband just speaking and modeling is going to be huge. In a month, he's going to all of a sudden have a lot more awareness of specific vocabulary. You want it to be German books that every time you read, it's only German. And what gets in there, right, are resources. That's hard. And the easiest thing is that you and your husband both speak German. And so you just pick a time. Is it going to be Saturday mornings? I would encourage you to pick something that's every single day for at least 30 minutes to get that language exposure. That's direct with them. And Adam Beck talked about this last week as exposure and need. So you're exposing it to them, but then there's some way that they need to respond. It could be German cartoons Saturday mornings, or, I don't know how you feel about screen time, or if it's, we're going to do German call and response songs or whatever. I think the resources, there are so many free resources online, even if you go to YouTube Kids and put in, Crazy Frog in German.
We tried Bob und sein Team, which is like Bob the Builder.
Yep.
Bob und sein Team. And they were not that interested in it, but I've tried to say, you have to watch a German video. We're only going to watch a video in German. And, because they don't understand anything yet,
Right.
It's hard to start with that. Now, we had a German babysitter this summer for a couple weeks, and she spoke with my 1-year-old in German, and she was like, "He totally gets it." She's like, "He gets everything. He totally understands." So, I mean, that was kind of fun, but we don't have that kind of input on a regular basis. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think we're just going to have to make a commitment. And my husband is less apt to make that commitment, I think, um, than I am. And I think our goals might be different than a lot of people's. Like yours is a definite need for total fluency, you know, because you need that for your family relationships. And for me, I mean, I guess I have to decide, do I want total fluency for my kids, or do I want a basic general, awareness, conversational ability, that kind of thing? And what I'm also interested in, and what I've kind of come to realize recently, is that it's not necessarily just learning the language for the language usage purpose. So
Right.
it's not necessarily that they're going to get to speak with more Spanish speakers in America, so they should definitely learn Spanish, or they're going to go to China and be able to work over there because they know Mandarin. It's because learning another language in and of itself is good for your brain.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily matter which one it is, just do it. Like,
Exactly.
don't spend so much time worrying about which one they're going to know and how they're going to get there. Just teach them one so that they're getting that brain interaction.
Yeah, it rewires their brain. It wires the neurons in a different way. And the earlier you start, the more that rewiring happens of where the language paths and the idea of the conceptualization of language and how it works. You're creating this duality of thinking that kids who aren't exposed to a second language do not have. They just don't have it. You can acquire it. You and I both did in our 20s. And we were able to figure out that, there are different ways, and the code switching and all of that. But like, I see bilingual kids who do that without even thinking. I'll never forget some of my high school students who were completely bilingual and biliterate coming in at 9th grade. And the way that they were able to even excel in math or social studies or history because of this way that they had of thinking about the issues and the knowledge from different perspectives. The empathy that they displayed was incredible. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your son is fluent at 6. It doesn't matter. But it does matter that he has an awareness, and that maybe he's not that interested, but he sat and done some flashcards with you about fruits and vegetables. And then, you're narrating the grocery store trip in German with him, or something like that. But I think it's just so important that you expose him in some way consistently every day. I think that's really important, because otherwise it becomes like they're not sure when to expect it. It's easy to slip back into English, especially with your 6-year-old, because that's going to be a little bit more of a fight, right? Because at this point, at least for my daughter, sometimes TV is a time to kind of check out and just chill and do something you enjoy. And so if you're trying to push that into being, you have to watch this in German, all of a sudden it's like a punishment. And
right,
you don't want
right,
language learning to
exactly.
be a punishment. It's fun. It should be fun. And so, if you can do that, dinner time, or related to food, or related to sports, maybe you can watch, whatever their interests are, try to kind of bring in German in a really joyful and playful and fun way, I think is what you really need to do. And you're right, determine your goal. It doesn't sound like you want them to be fluent, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Well, I think we still have a lot of connections with Germany. We have a lot of friends there. And so I think that we would like for them to be able to be conversational if we go visit. And we would like to be able to go visit and maybe stay there for a month or two, and, give them an immersion opportunity and not have it be completely out of the blue for them. I mean, so I think I've had to adjust because in our community, it seems really unrealistic that they would become fluent. I mean, most of our schools don't even have any language at all until high school.
Yeah.
And at that, it's just Spanish. I don't even think they have French or German at all. And so, trying to, how much of a commitment are we willing to make to this? And part of it, I think, and I would just encourage other moms, is part of it is just making commitment to your own language development. I mean, German is not my native tongue. So I've had to start, looking for German videos to watch. When I would be watching Netflix, now I'm going to turn it to watch some show in German on Netflix. Or I'm going to look at some of the German TV stations and they have streaming TV shows. And so this weekend I watched a whole lot of some really silly German TV shows. And it was great because I don't understand everything and I do need to catch back up and I do need to get more fluent and get back into it. I mean, when you're out of a language for so long, it's amazing to me how much I still understand actually. But there's still, I mean, your brain is amazing that you can still understand that, but there's still a lot that needs to fall back into place. So I think for me and maybe for moms like me, it's just making that commitment to do a lot of the things you might normally do in English, do those in German because it's the same thing. It's just like anything else. It has to overflow from stuff that you are familiar with or that you're working on or that you know and love. And then it becomes something that you can more easily share. So
I love this idea of yours that keeps coming up of personal academic development that will spill over into the way that you interact with your kids. It's so simple, yet it's something that as women we don't do because we don't take care of ourselves. We don't, at least I don't always take the time to do the things that I truly, truly love and let that spill over. I'm a musician. I majored in music in college. I was on the drum line. I mean, I lived, breathed, ate, slept music, and I've never gotten my instrument out in front of my kids. Mm-hmm. That is crazy. And it makes me just want to go and like listen to some classical music and get out the clarinet. But it's so hard. Like when am I going to do that?
Right. Yeah. And I think the thing is, Krista, for me is that I got to the point, I mean, like when you get to age 5 or 6 and then moving up from there, I think things just start to change because there does become a new space that opens up. And the other thing is that if you haven't poured anything into yourself, you have nothing left to give. Like I kind of realized this past year that I was just burnt out. I had nothing more to give my kids. I wanted them to be enjoying classical music. I wanted that to be reading to them and for them to have good literature in their life. I wanted them to have global ideas, but I was spent. Like everything, I was done. So if I'm not, and I'm not saying like spend all your time on yourself. I'm just saying like incorporate some things in your day that can, like a podcast is something easy you can listen to while you're folding laundry, while you're cooking dinner, while you're driving the car, something that doesn't interrupt your daily schedule that can still give you a little bit of input that then you're able to pour out.
Yeah, even just telling, summarizing it for our husbands at home over dinner and our kids are listening in. I fully agree that, and that's kind of what BilingualWe had become for me, just this hour a day that I dedicate to learning more about bilingualism with kids and connecting with people online has turned into connecting with people here in Denver as, and you're right. It's spilling over into who I am and what I do. And it's not like me sending the kids to daycare and spending a whole day getting my hair done and my pedicure.
Exactly.
But it is just this commitment every day. And I really think that's what you should do. Language-wise, find something that you can weave in, and that you're doing it with your 1-year-old. Continue that and just weave it in for 30 minutes a day at some point that you can make sure that it's German time and that the kids know that it's going to be German time and that they're bought into that. I think.
Okay.
I that's my advice. So I'm going to check back in. We're going to be checking back in with you on that.
Please do.
But it is, now that we're back to school, you'll kind of get a rhythm going, and I think you can. I know you can do it, and I think you will do it.
I hope so. Yes. I've got to just get my husband on board and get my plan, and we'll be ready. Get my resources. I definitely need some more resources.
I'm going to help you look for those because I have a dear friend who did a lot with German, and he's now teaching English speakers. But he just forwarded me. He forwarded me this article that he wrote online about something in German that was German grammar that was really high level. And he said, in case you know anybody who's German speaking. And I'm like, I don't, but now I'll just send it to you.
Okay, great.
Maybe it'll be a good resource. Well, we're a little bit over time. So
yep.
Mary Grace, what's that?
No, nothing. I just said, sorry, we're running late. Yep.
No, you're fine. That's the great thing about this. It's unedited. It's live. It takes us where we need to go. But please tell our viewers where they can find you, how they can find you, before we head out.
Yes. Okay. You can join our Facebook group, which is the Global Moms Network, and you can search for that in groups. And you can also find the podcast at theglobalmom.com, or you can search for it in iTunes or Stitcher Radio at The Global Mom Show. I'm also on Twitter at The Global Mom, and I just started an Instagram account for the show, which is The Global Mom Show. And then my personal Instagram, which I also just started, I'm trying to get into the Instagram thing, is Mary Grace Otis. So, and I'm also on Facebook. There's a Facebook page at The Global Mom Show, which Facebook doesn't really ever show you anything anymore. So even if you're subscribed to the page, you're never going to see anything because of Facebook's weird algorithm. So join the group if you want to know anything, or follow me somewhere else. Okay. And you can also subscribe to my newsletter. I send out periodic newsletters about things I'm reading and learning, and kind of some more personal blog posts and that type of stuff. So I would love to have you join us.
Great. I didn't know
Thanks a
about
lot.
the newsletter, so I'm going to be subscribing to that, because I feel like your content isn't coming at me every day, but when it does, it's really strong, solid, interesting content, and I really appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you for being on the show today, and we will see. BilingualWe is going to take about a 2 or 3 week break here to get ready for our 3rd series. So we will, forthcoming to be decided the topic. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for what you're doing.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.